shows all the time. I'm sure it'll be fine. Hey everyone, it's Christy. Welcome to the channel. Welcome to a very belated, I think, episode of Culture Club, where Culture Shots and Chrisiousity and I get together and we discuss art that has some kind of political elements to it or social themes that we enjoy, or everything so far I think has been stuff we enjoy. I think we have a bias for things we like so far. We haven't run out of things that we like that we're starting to critique things we don't like. But anyway, this time I got to pick, and my pick was one of my, as I was saying before we came on air, favorite movies for a lot of reasons, which I guess I'll get into as we go along. Stage Beauty, which is kind of an older movie now, and I'm a little bit surprised that okay, I'm going to introduce my guests, and then I'll talk a little bit. So hey, Chrisiousity, how are you? Oh, did you mute yourself?
I did. I'm unmuted now.
Very polite.
I'm
Thank
good.
you.
I like to mute myself because, I have people.
Yes, no, it's
people that
appreciated.
run around.
It's good. It's good on-air etiquette in groups of more than one. Yeah.
So
your experience with the film.
I had seen it when it first came out. So I don't know why I didn't really remember it very well, but so I saw it again. I think it was a very good film. I think it has a lot of layers to it, which I'm sure we'll talk about.
Yeah, I would hope so. Otherwise, I'm not doing my job as a host. And then also joining us tonight is Culture Shots. Hey, Hank, how are you doing? And tell us your history with the film.
Hi. Well, I'm doing very well. I bought the film. I didn't see it in theaters. And it's kind of my wheelhouse because it deals with theater and film and literature and all the things I love. But I missed it in theaters, and then I saw it for cheap in a DVD bin. Bought it, and watched it. I believe it's 2006, 2007, and rewatch it recently. So I like the film. So looking forward to it.
Okay, great. So I'll say a little bit. I guess I don't know much about, like you said, it's like from the mid 90s in the last century. God, old. But I guess it doesn't look old because it's a period piece to me. I don't know. Maybe that's just the effect of as you age things from when you.
You say mid 90s? It's 2004, right?
Oh, 2004. Sorry, I thought it was older than that. Okay, phew. Yeah. Okay, thank you for that. Thanks for the correction. Appreciate that. Right. So when I went on YouTube to look for it, I found the trailer that's in the description box below the video so people could check it out if they hadn't heard of it before. And by the way, spoilers. I mean, in terms of like the end of the film and its impact, we're going to talk about all of that. So if you don't want to know what happens, don't watch this show. We're going to assume you've watched this or you don't care. Either of those positions is fine. But when I looked up the term Stage Beauty, I was a little bit surprised that nobody had actually done like a movie, one of those movie vlogs on it, or done any kind of analysis. It's just clips or the trailers. And I think it's a film that has a lot of subtleties and depth, and perhaps it wasn't consciously doing things, or maybe it was when it plays with the idea of gender roles and identities in a way that I find, and also homosexual relationships in a way that I think was very well considered, and I think probably quite 20th century or 21st century, but appropriate for the story being told, because it's not trying to be a completely historically accurate piece. It was initially on stage, and it has a bit of a sort of farce feeling to it. But before we start, I guess maybe we can talk about our impressions of the film as a whole, and then we can each, then we'll go through it. I've got a timeline of the film. So I know we talked a little bit about our experiences of it, but is there anything about the film's themes that you particularly picked up on or want to draw some attention to, maybe from a Shakespearean point of view before we start, or other, like some of the gender issues that happen in this film? Chrisiousity, I'll start with you.
I think one of the things that struck me, and I think might be part of the reason that there hasn't been blogs about it, is the film is one of those films that's a lot darker when you think about it. than it appears to be on the surface. It has, and I think possibly intentionally so. You know, the surface is about theater. It's about putting on a beautiful show, and yet you start to notice. First of all, the movie. I should just describe quickly what the movie's
Yeah,
about.
I
Right?
realized that we forgot to do that when you started. I'm so glad that you remembered and are going to fill that role for me.
All
Thank
right,
you.
so this takes place, many people will know, around Shakespeare's day. It was
Actually, it was
actually
Charles II after the Restoration, so it would have been after the Revolution with Cromwell.
Yeah.
So a bit later.
A bit later.
Yeah, Elizabeth and James. Past that.
Right. So it was against the law for women to be on stage, and so the men's roles were played. The women's roles were played by male actors, and there is a so there's a male actor. He's playing the role of Desdemona. He's famous for the role of Desdemona.
Kenaston.
Yeah.
Right. And so, and there is a woman who does his costumes, who sort of helps him out a lot, and she's crushing on him big time.
Miranda.
Miranda. I am terrible with names.
That's
so.
okay if you've only seen it once. It's okay. I had to write everybody's name down in my notes.
Right. So Miranda is secretly going off and doing performances of her own on sort of, you know, way off London kinds of divey stages. She gets found out, and through various things, I'm not going to go through everything, the laws on women be on stage are at first relaxed so that women can play women's roles. And then, in fact, it is made so that women have to play women's roles, which leaves Kenaston unable to have a job, really, because he doesn't play men's roles. He's from childhood really been trained to play women. They have a lot of fighting. There's a lot of back and forthing. And the movie culminates, you know, it's a romantic movie, but darkly so, I would say. And it culminates in they're both doing the play, and she's playing Desdemona and he's playing Othello, and it's a huge hit because it gets really real.
Yeah.
And they end up going off together in the end.
Yeah, I find it funny that the way they do it, it's like they invent Marlon Brando
on the
style
waterfront.
acting.
Yeah, I remember in my notes on the waterfront.
In the Restoration time. So that's it had that modern device, which I think they play with well. So yeah, it's like realistic acting. And if you see anyone who has seen a film from the 40s,
Yeah,
knows that was not a thing, which is not bad, but per se. I mean, I love the more performative acting styles as well, but the realism as a sort of revolution in Restoration England is well a fallacy when it comes to accuracy
right.
of how accurate it was. Yeah,
Absolutely, yes. But it's very effective in the film because
yeah,
it's made for a
absolutely.
modern audience. Yeah. So yeah, Chrisiousity. I think you've talked about having some lighter tones. Maybe you're thinking about you said, and then describe the film. And then did you want to talk about the darker things that happen when you reflect upon it?
The main character, I think Kenaston is the main character, really.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's about both of them, but him more than others. He's a very abusive person.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got some serious issues going on, and I think that they were really, one of the things they played with was the idea of the abusiveness of gender roles and in relationships. And that doesn't, like, he doesn't necessarily change, you know? The last scene, he starts to try to actually kill her on stage.
You think so?
Oh yeah, I do.
Oh,
And
not my take at all. But okay.
yeah. Well, he sort of said it. He said, you know, she said, "I thought you were really going to kill me," and he said, I was trying to, but you didn't die." And then and then I sort of realized, this is the play. This is what I'm supposed to do. Like, they ended up bonding, but he came pretty close to. He
See,
was
for
right
me,
on the edge.
okay, maybe it's because I've
All
seen
right,
it more often. I guess we're talking about the film, so I don't know if we should pick this up later, but I guess
I
in the
prefer it.
yeah, is that was a callback to for me when they were having that argument about he asked, "How do you die beautifully?"
If you
And
fight, she says,
yeah, you fight,
because she always hated the way Kenaston portrayed a female getting killed, right?
right? And so whereas he was trying to die, he couldn't kill her. His Othello couldn't kill her Desdemona. I guess that's kind of how but art. So
All right. Well, I will.
yeah.
I'll pass it on to Hank because
Yeah.
I
I think both
there's gonna.
readings, this is it with art. I don't think there's a right or wrong reading. I think. And also he sets it up. They set him up as being really dark when he's looking in the mirror and getting ready to
Yeah.
play Othello. He puts it in the mind, and everyone in the audience is also thinking, is he actually killing her? So it's not unusual, that's not an unreasonable thing. Although if he wanted to kill her, I think he could have, but yeah.
I think at the end, my take on it is that at the end he changed his mind. I think that he was going to, and he started to. And I think that he, realized something there, and it had more to do. They're both very passionate actors, and they're both very passionate about the art of acting and about theater. I definitely got the sense throughout most of it that I felt like they excused a lot of his abusiveness, or they tried to in the film.
Okay. My take was all of the punishments he received was the retribution for the seeds he had sown earlier by being rude to people and being obnoxious. He sort of sown the seeds for his own downfall and then experienced it as the consequences.
He did, but did he really? I don't know if he ever got to the point where he fully and completely owned that he had done this to himself.
What I kind of missed in his redemption was an action that led to his redemption. Because if you look, in the end, he's playing in this filthy tavern, and he's being rescued by someone else. It's not really his actions that really set him free, so to speak. Well, he helps her. But yeah, it is true that you can see it in both ways. I personally think they did it deliberately, as in, because the entire audience thinks that he's going to kill her.
Yeah.
And he has what you call a motive, because she was the first woman. She was the woman, according to him, that led to his downfall. That stole his role. So he has a motive. He has opportunity, but she fights, and he knows that she'll fight. So that's another thing. He knows that she will fight. So it's one of those things that I find it's ambiguous in its execution, which I think is nice. It's not crystal clear. So that's why I think we're having opposing views now, which I think can be equally valid.
Yeah, not opposing. Yeah, just differing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Were you done? Because then I'll give my take, which is completely different than either of yours. So, but were you finished, Hank?
Well, I was just. What was the question, or how did I think the film was, or?
Yeah, but if we're talking about him as a character
Oh, him as
or
a
his
character.
redemption, yeah, that
Um,
because Chrisiousity had her about his not really owning anything, and yours was he didn't do anything. He had no agency in his redemption.
well, yes. Okay, I'm really looking forward to your.
Okay.
So let's do that.
Okay. Well, my take on it is that the main character isn't what is it? Kenaston, the man. It's the actor. The story isn't about him as a person. It's about who he is as an actor, and the entire comportment he has to everybody in the film isn't him personally. It's him and his role, who he is as an actor. And so I see it as by the end, his act of redemption is sort of teaching his Desdemona to a woman and taking on the role of a man, which is what he failed to do when he auditioned before the king. Because again, his only existence is in his role as an actor. So I think that it's only that part of his character that has any kind of redemption, which is why the redemption in my mind is the final scene where he takes on Othello and he gives away, Desdemona. And it's not about, in this case, his morality. It's more about his identity, which is when she asks, what are you now? And he says, I don't know. He doesn't know. He's let go of his own life. He's let go of his entire identity, and now he doesn't know where he's going from now. So I don't think he's been redeemed because he hasn't finished the process. He has to be a person now, not just known as a man who plays women fabulously. That's my take. What did Samuel Pepys say in the film? Clearly you've thought about this far more than I have, or something like that. No, it's just I've thought about this film a lot, so I have a kind of a really maybe a very awkward or weird take that might not be apparent to anyone.
No, I agree. I agree with you that there's definitely a question of his identity, not just his gender identity, but his entire identity. And he describes his training as an actor, which he was taken with a group of other young men or boys and trained relentlessly to behave in certain ways and not behave in other ways, particularly so that he could have sort of all the boy parts just stripped out of him, all the talking like a boy, acting like a boy. But it was honey, sweetheart. I'm hungry. I will be there in a minute, okay? Okay. All right, thank you. I forget what I was saying.
About him being an actor. Oh yeah. The boy trait, anything masculine. Yeah.
Right. But it was strictly a facade. As Miranda points out, he wasn't given emotional depths. He was taught all the movements, all of the hand gestures, and all of the vocal inflections, but he wasn't necessarily taught to feel it on a deep level. And so he was sort of caught up in a facade. And it was a facade not really of his own making. He was taught how to do this kind of Shakespeare role, which had very specific rules and limitations around the era.
Who says that?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm gonna hang on.
Sure.
Hank will pick up.
What I think that he was as a woman was how men saw women.
Yeah.
He was not a woman. He was like a shell of how men in power perceive women.
Yeah, and I think that's why the realism at the end in the final scene is such a contrast on so many levels. Not only to the performances, which we've seen repeatedly. I mean, how many times, do we see Othello performed in that movie? We are conditioned to have certain expectations as to what a good and a bad performance of that is within the frame of the movie before they change to realism. So not only is it the realism of the performance that in its impact on us as we sort of re-enter the 20th century or 21st century of how acting is done, but also Kenaston too is being real in the character for the first time.
Yeah.
in a character in this case.
If I may, because I just realized something, and it's kind of related to this. How do you feel the character of Othello has changed? Is that also how white men see race, or?
Yeah, I mean, the choice of Othello, I mean, and I get why the bedroom scene is good for this movie in terms of like why it works in the Shakespearean sense, but oh, Othello, really? Did you
Yeah,
have to pick the one with the Moor and all,
exactly. Yeah.
you know?
Um,
But I guess
I-
kind of like all the other stuff with history, Mark Twain and everything else, it's a reminder of what crap things were. Yeah, but
Yeah, no, but I find it interesting that if you look how in the first time they do the play, Othello is really played as like a weird exotic figure, and also Othello is redeemed by the realistic acting style in the end, I think, because Othello is for the first time played like a man, but
right.
still in blackface, which is not good.
Yeah.
Let me reiterate that.
Yeah, I don't know what modern performances do when it comes to Othello. I mean, obviously, maybe obviously having a cast that's correct, in terms of like having a more diverse cast would be a better way of then going around blackface. But I don't know exactly what, or they just have wider casting calls. Obviously, seems like but yeah, it is a sort of a shock to see that, and yeah, it's also then that in case historically accurate. It's historically accurate.
Yeah,
to have that.
Yeah, I was a bit sad that they used Othello. To be honest, I would have preferred, because you could do a lot. Because if you look at Shakespeare and the way he writes on gender, there are more interesting plays to pick. Let's put it that way. But I like you said, it's a very good scene. The scene itself is very good, but you could have done Macbeth, for instance, which doesn't have the Moor. But what did you think? Is that the only reason they picked the Othello and not another play?
Well, I have no idea. I mean, insofar as I think it's the drama and also the idea that you needed the story, I think, needed something for Miranda to tell Kenaston about being, being in a woman character that he didn't know.
Yeah.
And that fighting for your life is a very dramatic scene.
True. Yeah.
And way to do it. And so I think maybe it's also because people know that scene. It's more famous maybe than the death of Lady Macbeth, because Desdemona was innocent.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It reminds me. Have you? This is another tangent. This is the problem if you do this film with someone who did literature. Do you know Desdemona by Paula Vogel?
No.
It's a short play where Desdemona is bad, so to speak. She pretends to be innocent, but in fact she's like really devious, etc. It's quite an interesting read. So that's something for maybe the chat. If you get the chance to read that, it's quite funny.
Okay.
I thought Kenaston had a take on Desdemona that when they are discussing it, he says, "Oh, she definitely. I mean, she had it. She was attracted to what is his name, Hank?
Iago?
Iago tells Othello
Yeah.
that she's having an affair with.
Yeah, I
starts
know.
with a C.
Oh yeah.
Somebody.
Yeah, I know.
Cassius?
Cassius.
Yes, thank you. I'm embarrassed now.
Oh, no, it's. I
Put on the
should
spot.
know it. This is one of them that I've read. But I so bad with names. Anyway, Cassius, and his take is, oh, Iago picked Cassius for a reason. She had it in for him. She did kind of like him, and she's having sort of trouble with the denial because on some level she's a little bit guilty, you know. But that's just, Yaga wouldn't have just picked any old person. He'd pick somebody that, you know, he might have seen her kind of looking at or making eyes at, you know, somebody that would be realistic, somebody that you would believe that they had some sort of chemistry. So I thought that was an interesting take.
The
And
best
it's an
lies
interesting
are half truths, a bit like that.
And I think it showed some of my favorite parts of this movie are the parts where the actors talk like actors, you know, and talk about their craft and talk about the insights and the struggles they have with their characters and how they feel about, you know, what they do and the process they go through. I think that was probably those were all my favorite parts in the movie.
We've talked a lot about Kenaston. Should we talk a bit about Miranda? Because you said Claire Danes was one of your favorite actresses. So did you like her in this role, Chrisiousity?
I did. I think she did a good job. I felt unsatisfied with her role in some way. I felt like I would have liked to see her break out of the caretaker role, you know.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
And I don't think she ever quite did. I mean, but that's probably the modern me saying that. That is not something that somebody in Shakespearean England would have been like, you know, we women, we just do too much emotional labor and we need to stop.
Yeah.
You know, that's not the way that they thought about it. So,
Yeah.
like, is it fair? I don't know. I still would have liked to see it anyway.
Maybe, but maybe also it's a slight play on the damsel in distress and being rescued here with gender roles in terms of the fictional characters,
Right.
you know, and the way they play with maybe with things like gender roles and gender norms. So Kenaston needing to be rescued and being rescued by a woman is again sort of another way in which it's you know, it's going against convention. Miranda doesn't need anyone to save her. I mean, he comes in and gives her advice at the end, but he doesn't sort of rescue her. She's made herself. She's gone out on the stage. She's done illegal stuff. You know, she's become a great actress. She doesn't kind of need him and in the way that he ends up needing her, although they have that rapport where he's sharing things with her. But she's still standing on her own 2 feet, and she's left that performance stronger than he did. He was her supporting role that night.
But it was that Pips asked Kenaston to help her because she didn't act. She emulated
Him.
She emulated him playing Desdemona. Every move, every gesture. That's what they said. So I'm not saying that Kenaston saved her. Actually, she said she didn't want to act anymore. And he did save let's put it that way, did save the theater group because the king was going to watch.
Right.
And they needed her because she was the only actress who knew the part. So, yeah, but I do find the ending, I find a bit muddled. That's the only thing I kind of, yeah. But again, that's because I have a different view on Kenaston, the character. I find his redemption incomplete within the story. So that for me was like a drawback. Yeah.
I liked Christie's point that it was left in sort of an open-ended place where he was left in a place where he could pursue some sort of redemption because he was at least whole as a person. He hadn't gone that extra step. And I did worry because there was a lot of mirroring back and forth between the characters. They specifically made it so that the things that he did to Miranda, because he was pretty freaking cruel to Miranda specifically.
To a lot of people.
And to a
Yeah.
lot of people, but
Yeah.
I think you felt especially, he was gloves off cruel to her in a way
Yeah.
that was completely undeserved and completely I mean, there were things that he did with some other people, but they were people that you felt like, well, I get it. They were kind of assholes or they were rich jerks or whatever, and wealth and power to have they have a role in this story. But and he was sort of he had an almost self-destructive urge to fight back against people that were his betters. um and you kind of understood that even as you knew, well, you're getting into it now, kid, because the people will come back on you. This is the sort of thing that you don't necessarily do if you don't want consequences. But with her, he was punching down, and he punched down hard repeatedly.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like, and then it would be flipped so that a lot of the things that he had done to her, the specific kinds of humiliations and insults that he put her through, were things that he specifically had to go through himself, as well as getting the shit kicked out of him, and just sort of losing everything, and just being down in the very pits of squalor at a certain point. But again, this was stuff that I feel like there is an intimation that because he suffered, that's enough. It's like, well, he did his time. It's like, yeah, okay, maybe he did, but what did he get out of it? Because he seemed to come out of it still saying this is other people's fault.
Yeah.
But at least at the end, he knew who he was. Up through there, he sort of questioned even who he was, or if he even was a person without his roles and his the acts that he put on. Once he sort of had himself as a person, as sort of a full person, at least he had the opportunity to go from there and do something, though we don't necessarily know if he ever did.
Right. I would say also that I agree that Kenaston is the main character of the film in terms of driving the plot, but I think in terms of the emotional anchor, that the audience settles on Miranda, that we identify with her and her struggle and what she's going through. She's much more relatable emotionally to the audience, I think, in that.
True.
Between the two of them.
Also, and I think that's quite well. It's a bit what's a reverse Deus ex machina? No, it's a bit when every time he's cruel to her, he's immediately punished. Because the first time he's really cruel to her is at dinner. And the consequence of him being cruel to her as an actress is by letting the king say, "Oh, okay, well, let's have women act as well." The second time,
the second time, but first I want to say that scene has one of my favorite lines of all time, when the king decides that he's going to do it because the French, he's been seeing, and the guy goes, whenever we're about to, the British guy says, or English, whenever we're about to do something truly awful, we always say the French have been doing it for years.
That's funny. Yeah, that's hilarious. And the second time he's really cruel because he is one of the people who gets to decide who auditions yes or no, and he says no woman will be on stage here, and then it turns out that the mistress of the king also wanted to audition, and she persuades the king to only allow women. So he is directly responsible for his own downfall. Which I think is very Shakespearean, because I believe it was Brecht. Brecht said is that there is an inevitability, there's a tragic flaw in every Shakespearean hero, a tragic flaw, and his tragic flaw is his arrogance.
Yeah, and I think that we mentioned before briefly that this was a stage production before it was on film, and I kind of have a feeling that whoever wrote this really loved Othello and really loved Shakespeare, and had a lot of passion for this story and the themes of it. And yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone would say that Kenaston is a great emotional character, but I think that the drama of the story and the characters is very interesting.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. He's a great dramatic role. He's a very complicated person, and from a little bit of writing, I know enough to know, like, he's got the kinds of things that you want in a character who is going to be driving your plot. He's somebody that you want to watch because you know he's going to do something unexpected. You're not going to know from 1 minute to the other what exactly he's going to do, but it will be consistent with this character that he is. And at all points, I felt like his character was very consistent. It was interesting. He's a passionate actor. He's got a self-destructive bent. He's got arrogance about him, but also a deep fragility about him too, and a deep vulnerability. So it becomes it's interesting, and it's interesting to see him sort of go through questions of gender and of sexuality that you would kind of think that he would have thought a lot more about before, but it seemed like he didn't. He sort of intentionally didn't think about it. You know, for him, gender was much more performance. It was much more of a show. So I don't know.
Yeah, well, that's how he got his validation, right?
Mm.
But it's also, I think he doesn't realize how much his job was part of his persona and a part of everything he did, because he also has a homosexual relationship with a duke. And he says the only reason we had sex is because you were a woman. He says, that's how I saw you. And now that the king gave this decree, you're not a woman anymore, basically. Which is a very strange way of looking at it, but yeah.
It was very hurtful.
Yeah.
That's mean. But also, I didn't believe him.
Sure, absolutely not. No.
But I think, again, it was more to, again, if you do the reading as the movie is about the character, him as the actor being rejected for the thing that he's trained his whole life for being. One is he's not really treated as himself when he's in bed with him. But then when he's rejected because he's not really what he is pretending, or he is on stage. And so I think in terms of the rejection there, it's more to his identity as a man who plays women on stage, again, failing, where that before got him everything he wanted. Now it's all crumbling out beneath him and he doesn't know what he is anymore.
Yeah.
But again, that's my my take on it. One of the things I wanted to say about that was when I watched the film back, I don't know if I noticed this in 2004. It was a long time ago. I don't remember what I thought when I watched this movie. But when I watched back the scene where Miranda comes upon them, the Duke and Kenaston having sex, her facial reaction is one of like heartbreak, not of disgust or revulsion or anything like that. She just looks like her heart's been broken. And I thought that presentation was basically about love.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, that was the right thing to do. I don't know who directed her in that scene, or she just did that on her own, but setting up that her, because later on she, does get back with him, but it's not based on who he's with. It's just, he's with someone. She shows some jealousy a little bit before that, but I did think that for 2004, when we still had Don't Ask, Don't Tell.
Yeah,
right?
That's good. Yeah.
Basically, showing a normal reaction as opposed to a homophobic one. was good. And also, I thought the relationship, even the breakup, was it was not played for anything other than a rejection. It wasn't sort of, shamed in any kind of way. And I thought that was actually kind of progressive for its time.
I think for its time, it definitely was progressive in its views on both sexuality and gender and the fluidity of them. Because he clearly, I mean, we saw that he had feelings for the Duke. He was hurt to find out that the Duke was getting married to a woman. He was, but he was also sexually interested in women as well. So it really appeared that he was very much bisexual and very much didn't care.
Yep.
He just didn't want to be treated like the only times that he was upset about sexual promiscuity or sexual getting into these situations was when he was being treated badly by people. So it didn't appear that gender had much to do with his sexuality or that it was a concern of his. And having, I think, an openly bisexual male lead, it wasn't unheard of in these times, but it was by far not common. And this is a romantic story as well.
Yeah.
So this is a male romantic lead who spends half the movie dressed as a woman and acting as a woman and is openly bisexual and in love with, or at least very much caring for, some of the, one of the men that he has a long-standing relationship with. So, and again, it was the presentation, as you said. Nobody seemed, like you said, she wasn't grossed out. She wasn't upset that he had a homosexual relationship. She was upset that he'd found love with somebody else.
Yeah.
Regardless. She didn't react differently than she would have if it had been a woman he was with.
Also, the casting of the Duke, they could have very easily gone for someone very effeminate.
Yeah.
And they didn't. They went for like classically masculine, reasonably masculine in appearance. So, which also I think is very good casting.
Yeah, and it's never commented on.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's just presented as this is part of the story.
This is also, by the way, when the actor who plays King James.
Yes, Rupert Everett.
Rupert Everett at that time he's amazing. But he had some trouble getting roles in Hollywood for being gay and openly gay, because they wouldn't cast him because he's like the classical romantic lead.
Yeah.
He's tall, handsome.
He was in a movie with Cameron Diaz, wasn't he?
Yeah, in the 90s. What's My Best Friend's
My Best Friend's Wedding? Yeah, that was it.
But then it became, I don't know when exactly he came out, but he was also kind of, they wanted him as James Bond, and then you can't. He would have been amazing.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's gay, and at that time they said nope. So him playing the king, which he does amazing, by the way. He's hilarious.
He's great.
He was awesome as the king.
Steals every scene.
What I love about is the fact that he said to no one should play a woman in a play ever again, and the first thing he does is start playing, and he's a woman.
Yes.
And that's hilarious.
Yeah. Again, good writing.
It's really good writing. It is, though. I do wonder, and I wonder what your thoughts are on this. If you look at the power structure of the society that is being portrayed, that was the one element where I'm like, the king is being performed in a very positive light, I must say. So, which is great for Rupert Everett, but
yes. And also, if I could give my reading again on this scene, the king is dressed as a woman because he can, because he's a fucking king. He do whatever he wants.
No. I mean, I like that.
But what he delivers to Kenaston, the whole move on.
Yeah.
it's over, dressed as a woman on stage, which is what Kenaston was. So again, it's like his old self almost saying, move on, to the character, of which I think is the main character of the story. And also he says a great line, my astronomers tell me that a star's light shines long after it has died, even though it doesn't know it. Mm-hmm. And that's, like, again, one of the great lines of that movie that I really like, besides the one about the French. So I just see that, I think that's a kind of poetic scene for a lot of reasons.
True.
I think I get what you're saying, though. I mean, because in this case, we are sympathetic to the king throughout, and we feel like he's a decent guy and doing a decent job of kinging. You know, we're left not to question the kind of power structures that would put in place. The king's mistress can go give him a blowjob and convince him to change the laws and put people out of work. You know, like, like that's a questionable way to run a society, but okay. But that was the society that could happen. And, you know, I mean, I think that it's very interesting that they are talking about gender, and they're talking about the way that gender is enforced and policed with literal laws. Like, it's a very literalistic thing. Usually when you talk about sort of gender policing and gender rules, you're not actually talking about laws that are on the books. But this is about how this particular power structure is kept in place, and it's kept in place through actual laws.
Which, if it was not a construct, then you wouldn't need it, right? Yeah.
One of my thoughts, though, on that scene as well was, to me, it struck me as a little bit of like a carry-on film, and maybe it's too much British television I've been watching, but when he's like moaning and the ministers are outside, it becomes so ridiculous. I kind of don't take that scene, and the dogs are barking, and I just can't, you know, it's a ridiculous scene. But to me, what it kind of speaks to is how women have been relegated, or because of women being relegated from legitimate forms or back private sphere forms of power. Kenaston had through his arrogance and sexism offended one of the power venues that, in this case, the king's mistress had, was to try to convince him through sexual power. And we know that king's mistresses and wives, you know, have played roles, and sometimes been popular, sometimes been unpopular, but they've played those roles because they've been pushed to the side like that. And that was also kind of for the time. So it might have also been kind of like the ways that women can use power, or not use power, but try to influence power in the ways that they're relegated to. Because, Nell wanted something. Also, it advanced the plot, which is a story element that kind of needed to happen. So.
But now that you've mentioned it, it reminded me of when the king talked about how his father was beheaded. It was that one of the ministers said that female actresses were whores, he said. And one of the favorite things for the queen to do was act. And she saw that as a slight against her. So she had him convicted. And they say that was the start of the revolution in England, which led to the death of his father. Which is also the power of a woman, but also the policing of a man. A very complicated history in like 3 sentences in the film.
Fair enough. I hadn't thought of that. Thanks. So I guess we've kind of wandered around all of the various points that I talked about. The only thing that I wanted to say that I thought in terms of the structure of the film, again, seeing the stage elements of it, the way it mirrors itself. One of the critics, so I was kind of surprised when I went on Wikipedia and learned that critics, it was like 50-50. A lot of people didn't like this film. And I kind of wonder, it kind of went through my mind about the bias of male film reviewers, maybe. And first off was this guy just trashing it. But because they didn't like Claire Danes' performance, and they said it couldn't decide what it wanted to be. And they all said Billy Crudup did a pretty good job, but they didn't really seem to get, I think, the larger things that we're talking about here in this film. And I like the way that one of the critiques of it was that it was sort of a knockoff of A Star Is Born, which I thought was pretty unfair, because in A Star Is Born he always dies or almost whatever at the end, or questionable in the Christopherson case, and he's an alcoholic. And this isn't. I didn't think it was anything like A Star Is Born, because Miranda's not always his caretaker. She's very much more independent throughout. And also, Kenaston doesn't die at the end. In fact, he starts to break down, or he at least sheds his prior identity and is open to a new one. And yeah, so I found that it's got like a 7.7 rating, but a 63% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, and but 9 out of 10 Google users like it. And it was just sort of a random mix of reviews and reactions, and I didn't hate it quite as much as when I read the reviews. I was kind of surprised. Are you guys surprised? Or I guess you thought it kind of ended muddled, Hank, but does that surprise you as much as it surprised me?
Well, I when I saw it, I thought it was sort of in the vein of Shakespeare in Love, and it was made 6 years later. I think to the same. You often have, as a film is very successful, you'll have people trying to emulate a certain way that film was made. There are a lot of themes that hit upon it. I think I personally really liked it, but I can understand why people don't. The budget, I think, should have been higher for if the film were to be how it should have been, truly, because I think the budget is a bit low.
I guess to me, it gave it the stage feel, but yeah, I can see where that would sort of change it and make it a bit more expansive.
Yeah, that could have helped it enormously, and also I think, strangely enough, what I noticed with film reviews in general is that often, because a lot of film reviewers are old gossips, and they take drama outside of the film, which is on the sets. They take that with them, and there was some drama on this film, and I think that could have played a role. I think Billy Crudup was amazing in this film, and I think under a lot of, I think often or in other years he would have probably got an Oscar nomination for this. It's exactly the kind of film that usually people get nominated for.
Yeah, good point.
I don't know. I think that this was saying things about gender that a lot of people weren't going to take well in 2004. I mean, it was, like I said, I think from that perspective, it was still unusual. I think Shakespeare in Love did have similar themes, but it didn't get quite as deep into the nitty-gritty of, well, what is gender actually?
Yeah, true.
Or have a homosexual relationship.
Yeah, I mean, it was a more traditional take on romance with some playing with themes, whereas this went, I mean, nothing in this film could convince you that this guy was playing a traditional masculine romantic lead in any way, shape, or form. So I don't know. I think that probably was confusing to a lot of people, that he didn't come across. Romance in particular tends to be very formulaic, and this was a romance, but it was a romance between people who were not traditionally. This is not a traditional relationship.
I think that's why I liked it so much when I saw it, because it didn't fit that romantic storyline arc. It broke it down. It was something completely different. It wasn't like an anti that either. It was just its own thing. It was just a man who is a lead who had this, there's nothing like that before I could think of. Yeah. But yeah, in terms of, sorry, I want to end that unless someone has a second point, but I wanted to just talk about what I thought of really the tightness of the script before we wrap it up. Just because sometimes when you see, especially maybe more lower budget movies or sometimes big budget movies, there's a lot of stuff that is thrown at you and it's not always important. It doesn't always come back or wrap up nicely. And this movie really ticks along, like it hits its beats. It sets up, for instance, she borrows money from him So later on, she can pay him back after, they've had this fight before she auditions, and tells him he was the one who got her started. The way that all the characters they introduce are kind of brought back and used, and the ones that he slighted get their revenge even violently later on, and just the again, I said this at the start, but I think it was very important to the impact that it had at the end of the film in terms of the performance, that they gave so many examples of Othello, that scene being delivered in the stilted stage performance that they set up, because I think that effect on the audience watching it over and over, we become like, that becomes our new median. I think it's a really clever way, like just in a writing style for an audience, not just book audience, but a live audience, to sort of desensitize us to normal acting with those lines in particular, just that scene. And then the realistic performance has as much impact as at least it did on me, as when I saw the people's reactions in the audience, I felt what they were feeling. And so seeing that empathy with the audience and also experiencing it yourself, it was I thought a really amazing way to do something in film, very consciously done. And as someone who writes articles that have to be very well organized, like, I really appreciate that structure and thought. So, nerd.
I think that might have had to do with it being on stage first.
Yeah,
I think
that's what I think too. Yeah,
I think stage, the writing has to be. I don't know. I think it has to be tight from the beginning, and I think it gets tightened up even more as people go. You know what I mean.
Yeah, but there is also a real big step to, as Hank was saying about the visuals, transforming it to the on-screen, because you can see, you don't have to act so big, and so how do you maybe do more with less dialogue or taking things back? So the adaptation of that was also important.
that is true. I saw the making of this film.
Oh.
And the
you have the DVD, of course.
I have the DVD, yeah. So there was the playwright who also did the adaptation of the film, and he said, well, in a play you can happily have two people sitting and talking for 15 minutes. If you do that in a film, half the theater's empty. If you, most of the times, there are films who do it brilliantly, but so they had to adapt it. But I think it's when you have the same writer going over his own play,
that really helps,
and really tighten it up. I am now reminded on what David Mamet said, because David Mamet had to do that too. I'm not going to say that. That's not relevant. But no. But it's very difficult, I think, if it's your own work. But I think it really helped that the same guy was there.
Yeah.
To tighten up a little.
So yeah, as a movie, I think in terms of as a piece of art, not just a sort of cinematic experience, but just sort of like we just sort of analyzed it from a film study sort of way. I think it's really rich, and for its time, again, I remember being really impressed by it. It's 15 years old now. But it also kind of shows that we're seeing it as problematic in a lot of ways, that we've come a long way in 15 years as well.
That's amazing. And although I do think that, well, I first wanted to say politics has taken a nosedive, but 2004 was the Bush era, so I don't really know. But yeah, no, absolutely. If you look at LGBTQ rights, the way the perception now is in media, and also when I saw the film in 2004, I was not bothered by the blackface that much, and now it kind of sticks out. It really sticks out already. So, which is a good thing, that it sticks out.
Yeah, that's progress.
That's progress. But I do think that this film should be seen more by more people. So everyone in the chat, please go watch this film if you haven't.
With a friend, and then talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right, cool.
So I think that's our episode for this month. Who's up next? And sorry. Do you guys have any closing thoughts? before we go? Hank, did you have any closing thoughts?
No, not me.
Okay.
I thought you asked who was next, and I was next.
Yeah. Oh,
so.
okay. That was where I was going. I just realized, like, oh gosh, did I cut him off? Okay. So yeah, you're next. Do you have some? Do you have an idea? Do you know? Are you ready to tell us? Or are you gonna make us wait?
Yeah, well, I was hoping, because I wanted to do the last time. There's a great Indian film I want to show you, but I can't find it on DVD or download it anywhere. So this is a call to anyone who's hearing this. If you have the 2018 film Sir, it's an Indian film, which I think is absolutely lovely. But I can't get my hands on it. But I saw it in theaters last year when it was very, very hot, and I just needed a theater for the air conditioning, and it surprised me. It really surprised me. But if I still can't find it, unfortunately, I have to find something else. So yeah.
So watch this space.
Watch this space. Yeah.
Is there anything else coming out on your channel that you want to pitch?
I have been a bit dormant. That's because I moved to a new place. I'm working on a couple of things, so hopefully I'll be making some more things in the near future. Yeah.
Cool. Chrisiousity, what's up with your channel?
I do have a video which I've already done most of the things for that will be coming out in a couple of days. It's about apologizing.
Okay.
How to do it. So it's almost done. I think I had mentioned it the last time I talked to you, so you already knew about it.
Looking forward to this very much. Yeah, and as for me, I think I'm going to do a show on Saturday, and then I have a Patreon hangout, which I also have to do on Saturday because I'm flying again on Sunday. Whee! And as for anything else, just to say that for people, well, in the future, this won't be relevant for you, but Twitter is being DDoSed. That's why I couldn't send you guys the hangout link via Messenger.
Yeah. It's back up again, by the way. Twitter's alive.
Okay. Well, how long did that go on? For like an hour or something?
Yeah, almost an hour. Yeah. First, I thought I was like thrown off Twitter, but
me too.
luckily not. Yeah.
All right, so we can all get back to doing things going on Twitter and then regretting it when we log off.
Yay!
Yay!
Okay, so goodbye from me, goodbye from Chrisiousity and Culture Club, and thanks to the people in the chat. Say goodbye, Chrisioity and Culture Club. Say goodbye, Chrisioity.
Bye, Chrisioity.
Say goodbye, Hank.
Goodbye, Hank.
They did the bit.
We did the bit. Yay!
Yay!
Bye, everyone.
Bye.